The woman behind the leasing desk slid a single sheet of paper across to me and said, "Congratulations. You've been the legal tenant of record here for the last 14 months. I laughed, because that was impossible. I had walked into that office to end a lease, not to learn I'd somehow been holding one I never signed. I was leaving the city in 9 days. I had a job 2 states away, a bakery with my name going on the window, and a moving truck reserved for a Saturday I'd already cried about twice. All I needed was to give notice on the apartment I shared with my roommate and walk out clean. Instead, I looked down at the page, and there at the top, printed in plain black letters, was a name. Mine. Francesca, Frankie, Mercado. And underneath it, in the line where Theo's name should have been, where it had always been, because the apartment was his, the building was practically his family's bones, there was nothing. He'd erased himself. Somewhere in the last 14 months, without a single word to me, Theo had taken his own name off the lease, put mine in its place, and made the entire apartment legally, completely, irreversibly mine. I had to grip the edge of the desk. "There must be a mistake," I said. "My roommate holds this lease. Theo Halloran. His grandfather built half this block." The woman, Renata, her badge said, gave me a careful look, the kind people give you right before they hand you something heavy. "There's no mistake, Ms. Mercado. Mr. Halloran filed the transfer himself. He listed you as the primary leaseholder and removed his own tenancy entirely." She tapped the date. 14 months ago. 14 months ago. I did the math standing there in a stranger's office, and the math is what undid me. 14 months ago was the week I almost moved out the first time. The week I'd nearly taken a different job, packed half my things, and stood in our doorway with a box in my arms telling Theo it was probably for the best. He'd talked me into staying. "Just one more lease cycle, Frankie. The rent's better split 2 ways. Who's going to fix your terrible cabinet hinges if you go?" And the whole time he was smiling and arguing with me about cabinet hinges. He had already done this. He'd already quietly given me the one thing I didn't know I wanted. A home that no one could take from me. And never once let me see it. I want to back up. Because to understand why I sat in that leasing office with my throat closing, you have to understand the 2 years that came before it. And you have to understand Theo Halloran. And you have to understand exactly how long I'd been pretending I didn't love him. We became roommates by accident. The way most good things in my life seem to arrive. Sideways and badly disguised as inconvenience. I'd answered an ad. Room available above clock shop. Quiet tenant preferred. Must tolerate ticking. I almost didn't reply, because must tolerate ticking sounded like the opening line of a story that ends with someone discovering bodies in the walls. But the rent was honest. The neighborhood smelled like bread from the corner bakery. And I was 26 and broke and out of better options. Theo answered the door in a flannel, with a jeweler's loop pushed up onto his forehead like a tiny third eye. He had flour. No, not flour. Fine brass dust. On his hands. And he looked at me like I'd interrupted something delicate and important. Which, I learned later, I almost always was. Grandfather clocks standing shoulder to shoulder, mantle clocks, cuckoo clocks, wristwatches splayed open on velvet trays like tiny surgeries in progress. Everything ticking slightly out of sync, so the whole room had a heartbeat that never quite landed on the same beat twice. His grandfather had opened it. His grandfather had died in it, actually, in a chair by the window, mid-afternoon, and Theo said that like it was the most peaceful thing he could imagine. To go in the one room where every single object in your life was still keeping time for you. The apartment was up a narrow staircase behind the shop. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a window that caught the morning, and a couch that had clearly been rescued from somewhere it had not wanted to leave. "Rent's split even," Theo said. "I do my own dishes. I don't touch yours. I keep weird hours because clocks don't care what time it is, which is ironic, and I'll apologize for that now so I don't have to later. I bake at 4 in the morning sometimes," I warned him. He actually brightened. "So we'll never be awake at the same time. Perfect roommates." We shook on it. His hand was warm and careful, the hand of a man who spent all day handling things that broke if you held them wrong. That should have been the whole story. Two people, opposite schedules, splitting rent, passing in a hallway. It was not the whole story for very long. Here is the thing nobody tells you about living with someone. You don't fall for the big moments. There aren't any. You fall for the accumulation. I fell for Theo Halloran in pieces so small I didn't notice I was assembling anything until it was already built. I fell for the way he hummed. Tuneless, unconscious. When he was deep in a repair. Like the clocks needed company. I fell for the morning I came downstairs at 4 to start a sourdough. And found a sticky note on the bread bin in his blocky handwriting. Your starter looked sad. I named him Gerald. He's fine now. I fell for the fact that he'd actually fed my starter at 2 in the morning. Because he'd noticed it from across the kitchen. And decided Gerald deserved better. I fell for the night a thunderstorm knocked the power out. And I came down to find him sitting in the dark shop. Every clock around him still ticking. Lighting a hurricane lamp like it was 1890. They don't need electricity, he'd said, gesturing at the room. They just need someone to wind them. And he'd handed me a key and shown me how to wind a 100-year-old clock, his hand briefly over mine to feel the resistance. And I'd thought, oh no, very quietly, to myself, in the dark. And here's the cruelty of it. I was certain it was one-sided. Because Theo was kind to everyone. He fixed the widow down the block's watch for free, and let her pay him in lemon cookies. His kindness wasn't a spotlight he pointed at me. It was just the weather he made everywhere he went. So I told myself the sticky notes meant nothing. I told myself all of it, for 2 years, because the alternative was admitting I was in love with the one person I absolutely could not afford to lose, since losing him meant losing the only place that had ever felt like mine. And then the offer came. That's what made it impossible. A bakery in Charleston, the owner retiring, looking for someone to take it over. Not just run it, own it, my name on the window, my recipes in the case. The kind of thing I'd been building toward since I was 19, and burning my hands on a sheet pan in someone else's kitchen. The kind of thing you don't say no to. I told Theo on a Tuesday. I'd practiced it. I'd planned to be breezy and grown up about it. 2 adults, one of whom had simply gotten a wonderful opportunity. I made it about 3 words in before my voice did something embarrassing. Theo had been at the kitchen table, a pocket watch open in front of him, tweezers in hand. He went very still. He didn't look up right away. Charleston, he repeated. Charleston. That's far. It's far. I twisted the dish towel in my hands. It's a really good opportunity, Theo. I know. He set the tweezers down with that careful precision he used for everything fragile, and finally looked at me, and his face was doing something I'd never seen it do. He was working very hard to keep it neutral, and the effort itself was the tell. When? End of the month. He nodded slowly. He picked the tweezers back up. He bent over the watch, and in the most level voice I'd ever heard from him, a voice with all the temperature deliberately taken out of it, he said, "Then we should figure out the lease." I remember being almost angry at how calm he was. God, what had I wanted? I'd wanted him to ask me to stay. Stupidly, selfishly, I'd wanted him to make it hard. Instead, he was already being logistical about it. Already moving me out of his life, with the same gentle efficiency he used to put a watch back together. So I went to the leasing office to be efficient too. And that's where the floor fell out. I drove home from that office, with the lease transfer on the passenger seat, and my hands not quite steady on the wheel. He'd made the apartment mine, 14 months ago, the week I almost left the first time. He'd done it in secret, and then argued with me about cabinet hinges, to get me to stay. And he'd never said one word, not in 14 months of sticky notes and saved mugs and emergency scones. I parked outside Halloran's. Through the front glass I could see him at the workbench. Lupe down, lamp on, that little furrow of concentration between his brows. The whole shop ticking around him. He looked up when the bell over the door rang,
And he smiled before he saw my face. And then he saw my face. And the smile faded. I put the page on the workbench between us. He looked at it for a long moment. Long enough that I knew he recognized it. Long enough that he didn't even bother pretending. "You weren't supposed to find that yet," he said quietly. "Yet?" My voice cracked on it. "Theo, I was never supposed to find it at all. You put me on this lease and took yourself off. You made this place mine, and you didn't tell me. Why would you?" I had to stop. The clocks ticked. None of them agreed on the time. "Why would you do that?" He set down the watch he was holding. Stood up slowly. Came around the bench so there was nothing between us but the question. "Because of the building," he said. That wasn't the answer I expected. "What about the building?" He rubbed the back of his neck, and for the first time since I'd known him, Theo Halloran looked like a man who didn't know which true thing to say first. 14 months ago, the developers started circling. The whole block. They'd already bought the corner. They wanted this building too.
He gestured at the walls around us, the shop, the apartment above. When a place like this changes hands, Frankie, the only tenants with any protection are the ones who've been on the lease longest. Long-standing leaseholders have rights. Relocation money. The right to renew. The right to stay. His jaw tightened. New tenants get nothing. A notice on the door and 30 days. The pieces started turning, like the gears he spent his life inside. "So you made me the long-standing one," I said slowly. "I made you the one nobody could push out." He said it simply, like it was obvious, like it was the only reasonable thing a person could have done. "If they came for this building, I wanted you to be the name on the paper. Because they could throw me out, but they couldn't touch you. You'd have the protection. You'd have the home. And you?" He didn't answer. "Theo. And you?" "I'd be a guest in my own grandfather's shop," he said. Quiet. No self-pity in it, which somehow made it so much worse. Legally. On paper. He almost smiled. It was a fair trade. I stared at him. "How is that fair?" "Because you needed the home more than I needed the paperwork. I should say something here about the kind of person Theo is, because that sentence is the entire man. He had quietly, deliberately handed away his own legal standing, in the only place on earth that held his grandfather's ghost. And he'd done it, so that I would have a place to land if the worst happened. And then he'd hidden it. He hadn't even let me thank him. He'd just absorbed the risk into his own chest, and gone back to fixing other people's broken time." "That's not a fair trade," I whispered. "That's not even close." It made sense at the time. "It doesn't make any sense, Theo. It's the least sensible thing I've ever..." And then I heard it. The thing he'd said, and walked right past. "I made you the one nobody could push out. You did this so I'd have the protection. Fine. But you also did it so I wouldn't leave." He went still again. That careful, fragile object stillness. And in the smallest voice I'd ever heard come out of a man that size, he said, "I wasn't planning on you ever leaving." The clocks ticked. The whole shop held its 100 mismatched heartbeats, and for a second, I genuinely could not breathe in a room that was made entirely of measured time. "You weren't planning on me ever leaving," I repeated. "No." He didn't take it back. I watched him decide not to take it back. Watched the courage of it move across his face. "I built you in, Frankie. To the lease. To the shop. To..." He stopped. His hand came up like he was going to gesture at the apartment. The kitchen. The whole life upstairs. And then it just fell. "To everything. I stopped imagining any version of this place where you weren't in it. 2 years ago, I rented a room to a stranger who could tolerate ticking. And somewhere in there I just stopped picturing a single morning without you in that kitchen burning your own crusts. I don't burn my crusts. You burn your crusts constantly. I love your burnt crusts. I eat them so you won't see how many you ruin." He laughed once, wrecked and helpless. "See? That's the problem. That's been the whole problem. I memorized you. I memorized all of you. The burnt crusts and the 4 a.m. And the way you talk to the sourdough like it owes you money.
and I told myself it was just roommates, being decent. And then you came home today, with a moving truck in your voice, and I realized I'd been keeping time for a clock that was about to leave the shop. I had spent 2 years certain this was one-sided. And 2 years building a careful little wall around the fact that I loved him, brick by brick, telling myself his kindness was just the weather. And it turned out, the weather had a name, and the name was mine. You should have told me, I said, and my voice broke clean in half. 14 months, Theo. You should have told me. How?
He took a step closer. Just one. How do you tell the person renting a room from you that you've gone and fallen in love with the way they exist? You'd have left? You'd have felt cornered, or pitied, or trapped, and you'd have left to make it not weird. And I'd rather have you here as my roommate forever than lose you by reaching for something I wasn't sure you wanted. He swallowed. So I just took care of you sideways, with sticky notes, and cabinet hinges, and a lease you'd never check. I checked it today. You checked it today, he agreed, because you're leaving. Which is exactly the wrong time for me to be standing here saying any of this. He was close now. Close enough that I could see the brass dust still on his hands, the loop-shaped crease on his forehead, the gray that had started at his temples in the 2 years I'd known him. Close enough that the whole shop seemed to narrow down to the few inches of air between us, that loaded, ringing, almost nothing distance where a person either steps forward or steps back forever. Frankie, he said, very low. I'm not asking you to give up Charleston. I would never. You earned that with both hands. I couldn't let you drive away thinking nobody noticed you. I noticed you. I've been noticing you for 2 years. I reached up. I don't remember deciding to. My hand was just there, against the side of his face, my thumb dragging through 2 days of stubble, and he made a small sound like the breath had been knocked clean out of him, and his eyes closed. You absolute idiot, I whispered. I almost took that other job 14 months ago, to get away from how much His eyes opened. How much I wanted this, I finished. I packed a box. I stood in our doorway, and you stood there arguing with me about cabinet hinges with your whole heart. And I unpacked the box, and I never told you it was you. It was always you. For a man surrounded by 100 clocks, Theo went completely outside of time. Say that again, he breathed. It was always you. He kissed me, the way he did everything fragile and important. Carefully, like I might break, and then not carefully at all, when he understood I wouldn't. His hands came up to cradle my face, brass dust and all, and I felt him exhale 2 years of being decent, right into me. I fisted my hands in his flannel, and pulled him closer, and somewhere behind us, a cuckoo clock chose that exact, ridiculous moment to go off. And we were both laughing into the kiss, before either of us could stop, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air in a room full of borrowed time. That clock, he murmured against my mouth, has the worst timing in the building, and I include myself in the rankings. You're a close second. I'm aware. But here is the part where I have to tell you the kiss did not actually fix anything. Because it didn't. And I think that's why it mattered. Because the truck was still reserved. Charleston was still real. The bakery with my name on the window was still 9 days away, and 3 states down the coast. And a kiss in a clock shop, however much it rearranged my entire chest, did not magically resolve the fact that 2 people now wanted the same impossible 2 things. To be together, and to chase the futures they'd each built before they understood the other one existed. We pulled apart. He kept his hands on my face, like he wasn't ready to give the inches back. I'm not going to ask you to stay, he said again, steadier this time. I mean it. I didn't say any of this to put my thumb on the scale. You go run that bakery. You put your name on that window. I'll be the proudest man in 3 states. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. I just refused to let you go thinking it was easy for me. It was the opposite of easy.
I'd rather hurt honestly than wave you off with a clean little goodbye that's a lie. And that was the moment I knew exactly what I was going to do. Though it took me 3 more days to be brave enough to say it.
Because a man who would give you the protection and take the risk, who would build you into a lease and hide it so it could never feel like a leash, who would tell you the truth, knowing it could only cost him. That man wasn't asking me to choose between him and my dream. He was the first person who'd never made me choose at all. That night we didn't go upstairs to our separate rooms. We sat in the dark shop, on the rescued couch he'd dragged into the workspace years ago, and we wound clocks. He showed me the ones his grandfather had loved most. The ones with names. Yes, the clocks had names too. The whole shop was full of named things he quietly took care of. We talked until the windows went gray. And somewhere around 4 in the morning, the hour I usually started bread, I told him the thing I'd figured out. The developers, I said. They want this building. They want everything. But I'm the leaseholder now. The protected one. The one nobody can push out. I turned to look at him. Which means I'm also the one who gets to decide whether the building gets sold out from under you. He blinked. I watched him arrive at it about 2 seconds behind me. Frankie. I have rights, Theo. You gave them to me. You wanted me to use them to protect a home. I took his hand, brass dust and all. So I'm going to use them to protect yours. He'd given me legal standing thinking it would let me keep an apartment if he got pushed out. He hadn't done the next bit of math. That the same standing made me the one tenant the developers couldn't steamroll, which made me the one person who could plant a flag in this building and refuse to move, which meant Halloran's wasn't nearly as easy to take as they'd assumed. You'd do that, he said. For the shop. For the shop. I squeezed his hand. And for the idiot in it. So here's how it actually went, in the end. The real version, not the version where everything is simple. Charleston happened. I want to be clear about that, because I think the version of this story where I throw away my dream for a man is a worse story and a worse life. I went. I put my name on the window. I opened the bakery. And for 4 months, I lived 3 states away from Theo Halloran, and the only home that had ever felt like mine. And I called him every single night, and he answered every single time, no matter the hour. Even though the man kept the chaotic sleep schedule of a person who answered to clocks instead of the sun. How's Gerald? I'd ask. And every night before we hung up, he'd say, don't burn your crusts. And every night I'd say, too late. And neither of us said the other thing, the come home thing, because we'd promised not to put our thumbs on the scale. Both times I drove up, 11 hours each way, fueled by terrible gas station coffee and spite, and sat in a conference room as the legal tenant of record, and said no. No, the building is not for sale around me. No, you cannot relocate me. I'm not going anywhere. And neither is the clock shop on the ground floor. Because the clock shop is part of the lease, and the lease is mine. They had not planned on the protected tenant being a furious baker who would drive 11 hours to defend a man's grandfather's ghost. And then, 6 months in, on a phone call at 1 in the morning, I told him the bakery in Charleston had a manager I trusted, and a line of pastry chefs who wanted to learn, and a system that ran without me. And I'd been getting a feeling I couldn't shake every time I drove those 11 hours north, and the city got close, and the streetlights turned to the ones I knew. What feeling? He said. Careful. So careful. Like the ticking, I said. You know how I used to think the ticking would mess with my aura? You never said that. That was the other applicant. I thought it. The first night. 100 clocks, none of them agreeing, and I thought, I will never sleep in this place. I took a breath, and then I couldn't sleep without it, Theo. I lie awake in Charleston, in a perfectly quiet apartment, and the silence is wrong. There's no heartbeat in the walls. There's no one downstairs winding a clock at 2 in the morning, because it deserves to keep time, even if no one's watching. My voice did the thing again. The breaking thing. I want to come home. The line was quiet for a long moment. You'd open a second bakery, he said finally, and I could hear him trying to keep his voice level, and failing the exact way he'd failed the day I told him about Charleston. Here, you'd have your name on a window in 2 cities. I'd have my name on a window in 2 cities. And the other window, he said, very softly. The shop window, Halloran's. I've been thinking about that one. A pause. It says Halloran's. It said Halloran's for 60 years. Another pause. Longer, and I held my breath through all of it. I think it should maybe say Halloran and Mercado someday. The clock shop with the bakery in the back. Time and bread. The 2 things people keep coming back for. I sat down on my Charleston floor at 1 in the morning and cried into my own knees, while 3 states away, the man I loved waited, patient as a wound clock, for me to be able to talk again. That's the worst business plan I've ever heard, I said when I could. It's a terrible business plan. Clocks and croissants. No bank would fund it. We'll fund it ourselves. Out of spite. It's how I do everything. I've noticed, Theo said, and even down a phone line at 1 in the morning, I could hear him smiling. I've been noticing you for 2.5 years now. I came home in the spring. The moving truck I'd cried over twice made the trip in reverse, which felt like the universe filing a correction. Theo was standing outside Halloran's when I pulled up, brass dust on his hands. Lupe pushed up into that little third eye crease, and the whole shop ticking behind him in its 100 mismatched heartbeats. And he didn't say anything clever or careful for once. He just walked to the truck, opened my door, and pulled me down into him like he'd been winding toward that exact moment for 2.5 years, and the mainspring had finally let go. The lease still has my name on it. He never put his back on. I asked him once if he wanted to fix that. Make it joint. Make it official. Make it fair. And he looked at me with that maddening, gentle, fragile object steadiness, and said, "It is fair. You're the one who isn't going anywhere. I just want to be the guest. You never make leave." So I married him instead. Seemed cleaner than paperwork. We got married in the shop, of course. Where else? A small thing, a few people, the widow from down the block who paid for watch repairs and lemon cookies, and cried louder than anyone. We timed the vows badly, on purpose, so that the cuckoo clock with the worst timing in the building went off right in the middle, and everyone laughed, and Theo whispered, "Still a close second to me," and kissed me before the bird finished. People come in for a clock and leave with a croissant, or come in for a croissant and leave with their grandmother's broken watch finally ticking again, and the whole place smells like sourdough and brass, and the particular warmth of a thing that almost didn't happen. Sometimes, late, I find Theo in the dark shop, winding the old clocks his grandfather loved, and I bring him the heavy blue mug, the good one, the one he always saved for me, and he hums his tuneless hum, and 100 clocks tick out of sync around us, none of them agreeing on the time, and I think about how close I came to driving away from the one place that ever felt like home, and how the man who built me into it never said a word, never asked me to stay, just quietly made sure that if I ever wanted to come back, the door, and the lease, and his entire heart, would be mine. I checked the lease, in the end. I'm so glad I checked the lease. So tell me, if you came home and found out the person you'd been living with had secretly given you the one thing they couldn't afford to give, just so you'd be safe, even if it cost them everything, what would you have done? Would you have stayed, or would you have chased the dream 3 states away first? Have you ever had someone take care of you sideways, in small quiet ways, before you understood what it meant? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if this one got you, do me a favor. Leave a like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.